debate.
She's a one-woman economic wrecking ball.
NJ Spotlight News is trying to bring civility back to this divisive election cycle.
This election, what's at stake could not be more important.
Democrat Andy Kim and Republican Curtis Bashaw are the two candidates vying to fill the seat of the convicted former senior senator Bob Menendez.
And we're going to take our campaign and our message as a political outsider to all voters of New Jersey, and we're in this to win it for them.
We sit down to hear why they think they deserve your vote on November 5th.
This has been a very challenging and difficult race, a very dramatic one at that, and one that frankly has changed New Jersey politics forever.
An open discussion talking about all the issues that impact you. NJ Decides 2024, a conversation with the candidates for the only U.S. Senate seat on New Jersey's ballot, begins right now.
Tonight's NJ Decides 2024 Candidate Conversation is presented in partnership with Rowan University. Live from the NJ PBS Agnes Ferris studio in Newark, this is NJ Decides 2024, a conversation with the U.S. Senate candidates.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Brianna Venozzi.
And I'm David Cruz. Welcome to our live conversation with the candidates for U.S. Senate.
We're calling it a conversation because this is not a traditional debate. There will be no timed responses, and the goal for the evening is to talk about the issues impacting you through an exchange of ideas. Now, David and I will lead the discussion and direct the questions to each candidate.
We welcome our guest, Democrat Andy Kim, and Republican Curtis Bashaw. Gents, welcome to you both, and thanks for doing this. We'll start off easy by having you fix the economy. So we'll start with you, Mr. Bashaw. Everyone seems to agree that affordability is what's on top of the mind for voters today. What do you think is driving this crisis, and what specifically can you do from your seat in the Senate?
Well, affordability is a huge issue. You know, I run a small business that has now grown to 1,000 employees. We know our utilities are more expensive. We know that the food that we buy in to serve in our restaurants is more expensive. And in all 21 counties of this state, I have heard that issue loud and clear from New Jerseyans. And so to me, the way we fix that is to cut back on our government spending. You know, we had to deal with the COVID crisis, and then we've kept doubling down by doing more and more expensive bills that have caused inflation. And I believe the best way to cure it isn't to spend more money, isn't to try to do price caps, isn't to try to have mandates or subsidies, but is to actually unshackle our businesses, let them grow, trust our business people, grow the economy, make it bigger.
What do you think is driving this issue or this crisis?
Well, look, I agree that we want to make sure that we're growing our economy, but we need to make sure we're growing it for everybody. You know, right now, biggest corporations in the world are growing exponentially, but we're seeing a lot of small businesses really struggling to make ends meet. We're seeing a lot of people not invested in the stock market. Over half our country is not invested in the stock market. Other things like that. We have a huge racial wealth gap here in New Jersey, $300,000 wealth gap. You know, we see how it affects the Black community, the Latino community, Asian American communities. You know, there's a lot more that we need to be doing. Look, you know, that's why I took steps to be able to lower prescription drug costs, for instance. You know, something that was one of my biggest legislative wins. Being able to cap out-of-pocket costs for seniors when it comes to their prescription drugs at $166 a month, capping insulin costs at $35 a month. We're trying to do that for all Americans. But look, you know, other things that we did, we passed the child tax credit, something that cut child poverty in half in this country just in 1 year. You know, these are proven tools, but the Republicans in Congress got rid of all of these different efforts that we were trying to do to help people through these difficult times. So, you know, these are some of the things we're trying to fix.
You seem to be ready to unleash business. He seems to be ready to have some regulation. What's the difference here between you two on what role government can play in stimulating the economy or making things more affordable for folks?
Look, we live in America that is a free enterprise country. We trust our citizens here and our businesses, and that's how we've created this American dream. I don't think we can spend our way to prosperity. I don't think that we can tax our way to fiscal health, and I don't think that we can regulate our way to innovation and growth. New Jersey is one of the most expensive states for taxes. It's one of the most unaffordable states. It's one of the most highly regulated states. And ironically, New Jersey is 49th in what we get back from the federal government out of all the other states. So I don't believe these old 20th century habits of price caps, of subsidies, of excess spending, those are failed policies, that socialist policies that we've tried to force the hand of the market. We need to let our businesses thrive. So I lean against too much intervention, but I understand that we need to take care and make sure that everybody has a shot.
One of the things that we have found in our reporting over the past year particularly is that a lot of people we talk to about affordability point to affordable housing as a driver of this crisis. The estimate is that there needs to be about 200,000 new units of affordable housing built in the state. What are the barriers to meeting that goal, and what kind of federal legislative remedies are there?
Well, I think barriers currently are inflation, are making houses unaffordable for people, and high interest rates. So we need to make sure that we control inflation. I don't think that's by spending another $1.7 trillion as a way to solve it. If people think that we solved inflation with the Inflation Reduction Act, I don't think anybody believes that. That was spending another trillions of dollars. It was, in my opinion, misnamed, and it was a policy that was party line vote.
How do you remedy the affordable housing
I
crisis?
think we need to do several things. We need to get inflation in check, and we need to make sure interest rates come down. 2, we need to make sure there's permitting reform. It takes ages to get permits, particularly in New Jersey, but you can't just go out and build a house. It can take years to get permits. So that's a second thing. And thirdly, we need to make sure we have a trained workforce. And this is where I think, the trades and the trade schools, and making sure that young people understand that there's a real living to be made in the trades, and we need more workforce.
Well, I think this is an example where there is a difference here. For instance, for me, I look at the bipartisan infrastructure law that we did, something that's putting billions of dollars back into New Jersey, helping us rebuild our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our public transit. That's going to lead into the ability for us to build more housing. I mean, we need a decade of building to be able to help offset the deep challenges that we face right now.
That's a given, but how does a senator make something like that happen?
Well, if you look at, for instance, Mr. Bashaw said he opposes the Inflation Reduction Act. I think that's a perfect example, that piece of legislation, of where government investment is investing in private sector, in the markets. It's driving signals. It's creating an unbelievable response in surging energy innovation in America. We can do the same type of effort when it comes to building, be able to send signals to the market, incentivize the kind of building, but not just what we've seen. Like, the market is clearly not doing this on its own. We need to make sure we're building diverse types of housing, not just big, luxury housing. We need to make sure we're building lots of different housing, and government can play a role in incentivizing that. So
let's look at some numbers moving on from affordable housing. Unemployment right now is at 4.1%. Inflation is at 2.8%. 250,000 new jobs created, according to the last report. The Dow's at 43,000. How is this not a good economy?
Look, we've had some leading indicators move, but I think talking to New Jersey voters in all 21 counties, everyone realizes how much more expensive things are than 4 years ago. I mean, what's happened in the inflation over the last 4 years, it's not solved when you look at what groceries cost 4 years ago to what they cost today, what fuel and heating oil and all those things cost. This is a burden for New Jersey families. So the solution isn't, I don't think, to spend another $1.7 trillion. I don't think you can force it by saying, we're just going to cap prices or we're going to give away things here. I mean, I know I house 180 of our employees. Affordability is a very important thing, but I think these things don't get solved in the halls of Washington in think tanks. I think they get solved by unshackling our business people, making sure they can get permits to do the building, making sure interest rates are low, and that we're not living beyond our means as a country. And I think political outsiders and business people will make a difference in these issues. We can't have more of the same. It hasn't worked.
It used to be that you could get a blue-collar job, what they used to call blue-collar jobs, and earn a living, raise a family with it. The current minimum wage in New Jersey is $15, about half that on the national level. You're an employer, Curtis. How do you pay your folks $15 an hour, I assume? Are you a union shop at your places?
We're not. We have had hotels that were union hotels in Atlantic City through our career, but in Cape May, there's very few people that make a minimum wage of our 1,000 employees.
All right.
We understand the affordability issue, and there's a supply and demand issue with labor. I mean, we need workers, and we pay well.
And look, I mean, I think this is an example, though, again, of the differences here. I mean, I do think we need to make sure that we're investing in our unions and our workers. Mr. Bashaw, opposed trying to increase the federal minimum wage from $7 to 25 cents up. Like, I disagree with that. I think when you're talking about something that's really would pay what, $15,000, $16,000 a year, no one in this country can be able to live off of that.
You teed up my next question. So
Sure.
the MIT living wage calculator says in New Jersey, and this is almost like a best case scenario, family of 4, 2 adult parents, both working, 2 kids. Let me ask you, this is not much of a gotcha question because most people probably don't know this, but guess what the living wage should be according to the MIT living wage calculator? Got a guess?
In New Jersey or in the country?
In New Jersey.
In New Jersey, I would say maybe about 65,000, 70,000.
In terms of per hour.
Oh, per hour.
Yeah.
Living wage, I would say it's probably around maybe 20 an hour.
You guess?
I would say probably 19 to 21.
It's $30.19
Wow.
according to this calculator. Are those jobs out there for people, let's say, without a college education?
No, I mean, we're struggling right now to see these types of jobs. And, we've seen a challenge. And that's why, again, I think it's important that we address the fundamental inequality in our country right now. We got billionaires building rocket ships to outer space while we have huge amounts of poverty and challenge here in New Jersey.
Let me tell you what I'm doing. I've created 1,100 jobs. I have hundreds of people that make way more than $30 an hour because we started an enterprise that works. We started with 20 employees. Now we have 1,000. I make a payroll every 2 weeks. I've given them health insurance for 35 years.
How do
I
other
understand
employers
this
get to
stuff.
that?
What?
How do other employers get to $30.19?
I mean, we built our enterprise. We weren't ever paying minimum wage even before they raised it in New Jersey. I mean, we've been ahead of the curve there because that's where the market is, in my experience.
Let me get to one quick question. I got about 30 seconds for each of you, right? The SALT deductions are something that both of you, I assume, want to have restored,
Yes.
right? So the Brookings Institute called lifting the cap a massive tax cut for the rich, saying that mostly the 1% are the ones who benefit. In 30 seconds, what other tax deduction or cap removal would you support that would work for the other 99% of us?
Well, anybody that
And I
pays
need 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, anybody that pays taxes in New Jersey, income, all the taxes in New Jersey are deductible up to $10,000. So anyone who pays more than $10,000 in taxes would get benefit if that SALT cap was removed. And I will say this, when we are 49th in what we get back from the federal government and 3rd or 4th in what we contribute, there's a big gap. New Jersey is a donor state. So I think getting that money back to our state is important. Go ahead, you can answer.
Well, look, I mean, I'll just start by saying, the SALT cap, that isn't quite the case when it comes to our state. We have people here who are not super wealthy that are struggling with this. But other things, I mean, look, we should keep the standard deduction doubled what it was before. I think that was a good move. I think the efforts to try to give 20%, off for small businesses. These were some good moves. But, the effort to raise the estate tax up to what, I think it's $30 million. These are the types of things, what we saw in terms of the highest brackets, the taxes, dropping the taxes for the wealthiest Americans, the biggest corporations. Those are things we can do without.
All right, I'll stop you there. I'm going to move us along. So this weekend, a couple of surveys came out, Kaiser Family Foundation being one of them, that said for young female voters, abortion, not the economy, abortion is the top issue. So, Mr. Bashaw, let me ask you, you both say that you're pro-choice. What specifically does it mean to you when you say you believe in a woman's right to choose? And is there a point in a pregnancy when you believe there should be a restriction on having an abortion?
I've said, I believe that a woman has the right to choose her medical care and those decisions. And I do think we need a federal law to codify that in all 50 states. And that should be worked on in a bipartisan way. And I think that process will bring us to reasonable common sense reforms. When we had Roe, the number of weeks were determined based on viability from 50 years ago. And I think that there's going to be that conversation that happens. I think that, New Jersey has a pretty extreme position going all the way into the 9th month. I think as we work on this as to find common ground as a country, which I think is long overdue. We've been fighting about Roe my entire adult lifetime, that we need to roll up our sleeves and we will find common ground. I believe most people believe that parental consent is an important right for a family with minor kids to have a life-altering procedure done. And so I think that when people get down to business, which is why I want to go to D.C. to work. I mean, my opponents voted 99% with his party.
Let me ask you then, what would you like to see in a federal bill that would codify abortion?
I think that we need to codify a woman's right to choose in all 50 states federally. I think that a reasonable restriction would be that there's a viability determination based on doctors and a conversation.
So you're not willing to say at what point you think that there should be a limit?
I'm not a doctor and I'm not a woman. I think that that's a process that we need to go through to come to common ground.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Let's say you get elected to Senate, a federal abortion bill comes up for a vote. Would you be willing to say right here that you would break from your party to vote in favor of that bill?
Look, when my party is right, I'm going to defend them and support them. And when my party's not right, I'm going to stand up to it. I'm Curtis Bashaw. I'm running for this Senate seat to represent New Jersey. I'm my own person. I don't agree with my husband on everything. So I'm going to be that person, and I think people that know me understand that.
So, Mr. Kim, what's the difference then between the two of you here? If you're both pro-choice, do you support abortions without any restrictions? Do you support on-demand abortions without restrictions?
Well, look, I think the number one difference between us is that, I believe that abortion is constitutionally protected. My opponent, Mr. Bashaw, does not. I think a woman's right to choose, her ability to make decisions about her own body is fundamental to what it means to have freedom in this country. But we shouldn't have government being able to tell us, what we can do with our own bodies. So I think that that's the fundamental difference. That's why I take opposition to Mr. Bashaw saying that he's pro-choice, because I think when you're talking about that, you're talking about the fundamental freedoms about the Constitution, be able to do this. The fact right now is we do not have choice right now for so many women. Over 12 states fully banning abortion right now. 6 of them, are banning this, including life of the mother. 10 have no exceptions for rape. And so, to your other question about where does this go? I mean, what I would say is this is something that a woman can decide. And what we've seen is that when there are restrictions that are put into place, that is being weaponized in those states. I mean, in Alabama, you can go to jail for 99 years if you perform an abortion. They're going after doctors. Doctors are worried about doing anything, even when it comes to miscarriages and other issues out there, because they're worried about legal repercussion. So, Mr. Bashaw said that he thinks that there's a common sense approach that, we can come together as a country on this issue. I'm not sure what you have seen about how this debate has gone on in our country right now, but it is very toxic and it is very corrosive. I do not see how you going down to the U.S. Senate is going to single-handedly change everything that we see. You have a party, you're going to support a Senate.
Vote.
Let me finish.
Yeah, okay.
You're going to support a Senate majority if it's a Republican. And look at the other people that are there. Your party is on a very extreme side of this. And you endorse Donald Trump, who put 3 justices on that overturned Roe v. Wade. So I just simply still do not understand how you can call yourself.
So then how do you balance saying that you supported the Supreme Court's decision?
Well, I understand what happened in Dobbs. That doesn't take away the fact that I'm pro-choice. Dobbs sent it back, separation of powers. They didn't find it specifically in the Constitution. And the process would be for it to go to the legislative branch and be codified, which I would happy to work on. To your question about what I'm going to do down there and how I can single-handedly try, I'm trying because I think that I can make a difference, Andy. And the fact is, you've been there for 6 years, and you voted 100% with your party. You wouldn't understand how I might be able to stand up to mine because you never stood up to yours. And that's what is different about us. I'm a political outsider. I'm not beholden to anybody. I've had a great career. I'm a businessman that's created jobs on the front side of the economy. And I'm my own person. And I'm going to go down there and I'm going to defend a woman's right to choose because I believe it in the same way I believe I have a right to be married. I will talk about our freedoms all day long, and I'm happy to move to that conversation.
Do you want to respond to
that?
Well,
I'll respond by saying, look, he said it himself. The Dobbs decision said specifically that the Constitution does not afford a right to abortion, and he agrees with that, and I just disagree, and I think that that's the fundamental aspect. But I will say, look, I think everyone in this state has seen me stand up to my own party when I think they're doing something wrong. In the Senate race, I got through a very contentious primary, standing up to some of the most powerful political leaders in the state in my own party. So yes, I'm willing to stand up against leaders in my own party. But what I will say is, yes, I was proud to vote for the Women's Health Protection Act to codify a woman's reproductive rights. When I hear you say that you think the position that New Jersey has on abortion and affording reproductive rights to women is extreme, I take issue with that, and I disagree with you significantly.
Let me ask both of you this question then, since we're talking about leaving it to the legislative branch. Would either of you support suspending the filibuster to help restore a national right to abortion? And how would you get it done through legislation otherwise?
I think that the whole point of America was to have checks and balances and separation of powers, so it forced us to have conversations and find common ground. We don't want to flip-flop back and forth with a majority of one, and that's why the Senate was conceived as the cooling saucer of our democracy, a place where there were longer terms, they were staggered terms, and this filibuster is a tool of that. I think that it should be verbal. I don't think it should be a fake filibuster, but I think that that's a tool to sort of force 60 votes. So why not? Because that forces people to actually talk to each other and not just whipsaw back and forth.
Because a lot of votes don't even come up to the floor for a vote because of needing to have that sort of super majority. So you're saying you don't see room for reform there, or you wouldn't want to see reform or suspension?
It's become a name-only thing, and I think a filibuster is a filibuster. You got to be willing to put your words behind it. So make it real. But I get nervous about us when we don't get what we want. Freedom is a little messy, and our structure set up a process to make sure that we don't whipsaw back and forth too much. It's hard to amend our Constitution. There's a reason for that.
Mr. Kim, where do you stand on the filibuster and possibly either suspending it on this issue or reforming it?
Well, I think reforms are needed. In the House of Representatives, I helped pass the Women's Health Protection Act, only to see it fall short in the Senate. We passed universal background checks to try to address gun violence, something that over 94% of Americans favor. We passed it in the House, failed in the Senate because of the filibuster. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, critical efforts to be able to protect our right to vote, our democracy, failed on delivery in the Senate. And we just see this weaponization of this. What we've seen, I understand, Mr. Bashaw, what you're saying about the Senate, but we've also seen the weaponization of that over the last few years, the last 10, 20 years. It's used so much more. It's gotten to the point where, the Senate just isn't able to actually make a decision. The way I say is just let us vote.
If you
let the
see,
Senate
let me
vote
ask you
and
this.
let them decide.
If you see abortion care as health care, should the federal government be on the hook to pay for it through Medicaid?
Well, I think that they could. We passed some legislation that would say, look, that would be open, that if people require Medicaid in order to be able to have health care, women's reproductive rights, yes, I do think that that's something that could be used.
Mifepristone, more commonly known as the abortion pill, it's used in about 63% of abortions in the U.S. Should that remain on the market?
I don't think government should be telling us what medicines we can, get prescribed by our doctor. Yes, I think it should be.
Mr. Kim?
Well, absolutely. But the problem is that when the Dobbs decision happened, now women are not able to get this type of medication in so many different states.
All right, we're going to move on.
So when you two were last together, Curtis Bashaw, you said there were 900,000 illegal aliens, your terminology, in the state, and that their presence here is making people feel unsafe. Should people really feel unsafe, and why? And where did that number of 900,000 come from?
I'll try to answer all your questions.
Yeah, sorry.
The number came from a assemblyman, a report from the New Jersey Assembly, and I know there's other reports that call it more at 450 or 500,000. Okay. So let's just say it's somewhere around 500,000 plus illegal people living in New Jersey. I will say this, having driven 75,000 miles in my car since January 15th to all 21 counties and talking to so many of our citizens, people are concerned. This and affordability are the two issues. I don't understand. I want to know from Congressman Kim, do you really think that the border policy has worked for New Jersey? We have all these people. I don't think that the citizens are telling me an untruth, that they feel less secure. It's a level playing field issue. Our immigrant communities are the ones most upset about this because there is an open back door into our country where you can cut the line. It's just such a common sense fairness issue. The trades, the rank and file trades are upset about the fact that you can come through a back door. I lock the back door of my house at night. That's okay. That's not a big deal. And why we have these holes in the border that people walk through. I stood there and watched 62 people 3 months ago between 12:30 and 3 in the morning from all over the world as if they had TSA pre-check. It was an absurdity, and you realize, talk about politicizing an issue. We should decouple border security from immigration policy. And it's okay for a country to have a boundary with ports of entry and have those be lockable. And the cost to our state, the concern for our state is an impact. Immigration policy, you want to, I'll just finish my thought here. I support that 100%. That's another issue we need to resolve in a bipartisan way. A third of my workforce are first or second generation Americans. One of the great highlights of my life was being sworn in as an honorary judge for a day to swear in 3 of our employees when they naturalized. I love immigration and want to work to make that work. But having a secure border, you said on PICS, well, we don't need to go there. It's really, we can have an orderly process without doing that, and voted against 7 bills that would have at least tried to address this border security issue. Just the other day, I'm passionate about this. I was in Warren County, and a woman, the candidates had all introduced themselves as more of a Republican rally. And this woman said to us, no one's brought up fentanyl. So afterwards, I walked right up to her, and she said, I lost my daughter. I'm raising her child. why aren't you talking about fentanyl? And we just hugged. We can't ignore the fact that this is an issue. And I think that's why a lot of voters are going to vote for me, who are not Republican.
All right,
They're-
let me. You got your points in there.
All right.
How much of that do you want to agree with or disagree with?
Well, look, let me work backwards there because I feel like there's a disconnect in that front. Yes, I also am very concerned about fentanyl. You know, I lose at least one person a day in my congressional district every day to opiate overdose. I mean, this is a catastrophe. But the fact that he just slipped that into that conversation, I mean, so much of the fentanyl challenge that we have, we're having prescription drug challenges. A lot of the fentanyl coming into America is actually brought in by American citizens, other issues. But the fact that he raised it so nonchalantly just adds to the sense that people crossing the border, that migrants are the reason for the fentanyl crisis. And I just, I disagree. I do agree with what you said that, we should try to separate border security from the immigration discussion. I'm somebody that worked in national security over the course of my career. I worked in counterterrorism. I worked in war zones. Of course, I want to keep our country safe. And I believe that as a sovereign nation, yes, we can have control over all of our borders, land, air, sea. And that's why I have supported border security measures when they're not weaponized in a way to try to, attack President Biden and other things like that. A lot of the legislation you've raised, these are pieces of legislation that have poison pills, elements in it, that are trying to take away resources from children that come on their own and other things like that. But, I think there are sensible approaches. Like, why is it that we have such a large migrant challenge right now in our country? It's in part because not just the border security, but we have only 682 federal immigration judges as a country. They have 3 million pending immigration cases. It would take 10 years for them to just get through those cases. So yes, we should surge the number of immigration judges we have. We should increase the number of asylum officers. The bipartisan deal that came up in the Senate is addressing some of these. Those are things that are going to help us be able to get this under control.
Let me dig into this decoupling a little bit that you brought up, Mr. Bashaw. What does that mean, and how does it work? And who takes care of the immigration? Who takes care of the border security? How do you break that up?
I just think that it's more common sense stuff, and that sounded like a DC insider to me, going through all the reasons and rationales while there's a hole in the wall that people are walking into every single day, and they are coming to New Jersey. And maybe it's not all fentanyl, but are you really trying to say no fentanyl's coming through these holes in the border? I mean, the fact is, closing a border, having its portals be lockable, and enforcing our laws, why is that a big deal? Why hasn't Biden, Harris, and you done it? New Jerseyans want to know. It doesn't make any sense to them. I hear it every day.
Look, we have invested significant amounts of money in bipartisan ways to try to address the issues of fentanyl coming into our country. For instance, a lot of that is happening through trucks and other means. If that is, in the different ways that it's happening, that's why we need scanners, we need technology, other things like that we have put forward, and that's something that I will continue to
Have
support.
you been there to see the holes in the wall?
Have I been?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I'm working. I have been working on a lot of national security issues.
But
when it
you've
comes
been to the
this.
border and seen it.
No, I haven't gone to the
Okay.
border to
And you've been there
look at
6
it that
years
way.
in
But,
Congress.
but
I mean, my point is, when you see it, Congressman, it seems absurd that we don't fix the holes in the wall. It just is absurd. And voters see that. I'm just telling you.
yeah, look, what I would say is we've supported border security, and I've supported walls and barriers in the right places. But we don't need what you're proposing, which is a wall from sea to shining sea.
No,
There's
I'm just
lots of
saying
different
fix the
technology
holes that
out
are
there
there right
that
now. Just do it. You're in charge.
All right, let me move this on a little bit. On the question of mass deportations, do you support that proposal by the former president? And how would something like that work? And what would the impact of that be?
I don't think that that's feasible. Personally, I think that is really impractical. I do think that we need to know who's here. And it's why, because there's more people coming every day, I think it just makes sense to secure the border we have. Let's not make the problem
What
worse.
about those?
So
the
those
10
who are
million that
here,
some people say are
I
here.
would definitely, in getting to know who they all are, if they're a criminal or have a criminal history from their country or from our country, I think that that's reasonable to ask them to go home. But I think we need to have a compassionate conversation, and we need to work on some paths for citizenship. In my opinion, I don't think it's possible to deport 10 million people.
Well, not
How
only
would
is it impossible to be able to do, but look, it would also be terrible for our economy as well. This is something that, when I talk to people across New Jersey, I talk to a lot of businesses that say, look, we need the workforce right now. Can we make sure that people coming in, that they can get, the work authorization and other things like that? So, I think it makes economic sense. I mean, I think on this question, Mr. Bashaw and I are on a similar path. We want to make sure that there are pathway forwards. I passed the Dream and Promise Act for our DACA Dreamers. That used to be bipartisan. I hope it can be, to find more people that we can work with in different ways. But yeah, look, I mean, I think that that's something that we want to make sure we're addressing.
When should deportation be an option?
Well, look, I mean, I think we have on the books, for instance, already that, if somebody is convicted of crimes, especially violent crimes, drug offenses, other things like that, yes, those are means by which to be able to deport. And we have that on the law, in the law already. And those are actions that I think I would be supportive of.
There was a time when the Gang of Eight, which I know you both heard that reference, there was actually close to an actual deal on immigration.
Yeah, 11 years ago.
If something like that were ever to happen again, unlikely it seems in this partisan divide that we're experiencing now, but what would need to be in a national immigration reform bill for you? One or two things. Take them off.
I think that we need to have a process that's legal, and we need to have the secure border so it can be enforced. You can't have a process if there's a backdoor or shortcut. So that's one. And two, we need people like me, I believe, political outsiders, not career politicians and DC insiders, down there rolling up their sleeves to work across the aisle to bring people together around a vision. I agree. We need workers. A third of my employees are first or second generation Americans. They
But
came
it's kind of
legally.
easy to say, let's do this on a bipartisan way, but easier said than done, clearly. How does Curtis Bashaw go to the Senate and whip these folks into shape?
Should I not try? I'm just saying we need people to actually be willing to try. And that's the conversation will start. And there are senators down there that do want to work in a bipartisan way. We aren't going to solve our country's problems from the extremes. We're going to solve them from the middle. And we don't need people who vote 100% of the time in Washington with their party. We need people that are going to cross back and forth, pull people together. When I did Congress Hall, everyone said it was impossible, David. Everyone.
I'm going to actually leave
You're going to get me later?
I have about 45 seconds for you on that question.
Well, look, I think that, 11 years ago.
One or two things that might be in a bill that you could vote for.
Well, look, I'm happy to support border security. I think that's an important component of that. But also, we want to make sure that we take these steps to be able to ensure that we have legal pathways. We should be increasing the number of legal pathways. We have a huge backlog of people, and these are people that want to come, high-skilled labor, people that want to innovate here, build businesses here. And right now, we're shutting the door on them in so many different ways. And I hope that we have that pathway forward for DACA Dreamers and others to be able to show them that they are welcome here.
Yes or no pathway to citizenship?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Another crisis. As we sit here tonight, we all are aware that the U.S. is preparing to deploy a missile defense system along with about 100 troops to Israel. This is what the Biden administration says to help Israel after Iran's most recent attacks. But do you support putting specifically American boots on the ground in this conflict? And Mr. Kim, I'll ask you that first.
Well, I'll just start by saying I think, I'm familiar with the technology, the THAAD missile defense system. That is something that I'm supportive of. I've supported the defense. I believe in Israel's right to defend itself. I lead the charge every single year in the appropriations process for Iron Dome and other efforts to be able to provide that defense. What we saw with Iran direct attack on Israel using the ballistic missiles, these are unprecedented efforts that we're seeing from such a dangerous adversary. That we want to make sure that there is security there. So, look, I think that there are ways to be able to do this, and that's going to be safe for our troops. I've worked in these types of situations. I've worked at the Pentagon. I worked out in Afghanistan at the height of war. I've seen the deployment of the THAAD missile systems and other types of systems before. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. We're having strong oversight over this.
So you support putting American boots on the ground?
Well, I support these types of defensive measures like the THAAD missile defense system.
Mr. Bashaw?
I mean, there again, it sounds like a DC insider talking to us.
About
I mean,
knowing the
I
issues,
understand, but
the experience. Like you just keep calling me a DC insider, a bureaucrat. I just find it very offensive. There are people who have served our country. People I've worked in war zones. Risked my life for this country, and I just do not appreciate the labeling. You're trying to serve in the Senate. Like, have some respect for public servants.
I do.
No, you don't. You bought your website, CurtisBashawForSenate.com, CurtisBashawForGovernor.com 11 years ago. You've been just thinking about this in terms of how it is about you and your career. But right now, this is a very scary moment in the world. And I hope that I can try to bring the expertise and the experience that I have. Do not belittle it.
I'm not. So let me respond to that if you don't mind.
Sure.
I applaud public service. That's why I took 2 years and I ran the Casino Reinvestment Authority for a Democratic governor in our state. I served 12 years on Stockton's board. I worked on the reopening task force. I also built a business. And that business, starting with 24,000 employees, payroll by payroll over 35 years, is also a public service. I work for the people that work for me. Together we make an economy that covers 800 families' mortgage payments, rent payments, car payments, tuition, and we pay our taxes to fund the government. I appreciate career public servants, police, fire, EMTs, school teachers. We have all of our military.
So you just don't respect this public servant?
I get skeptical of bureaucracies that are bloated and inefficient, where they lose touch with real life, with being on the front lines of the economy, with knowing what it is to deal with a one-size-fits-all regulation cooked up in a Washington, D.C. office building, that they don't understand the unintended consequences. So I have respect for the urge to serve. We all have to be citizens, and I respect that service. So any confusion there, I apologize for, because I don't disrespect it. I believe all of us are citizens and have to be in service to our country. So
Let me steer us
your
back to the question
Yes.
about American boots on the ground.
I support, we have allies and we have enemies in the world. And I believe we need to support our allies. I think we need to support Israel's right not only to defend itself, but to be able to win the war. I don't think we should micromanage the war. Boots on the ground, I'm not sure if those people that they're proposing to send there are because they're the experts in that missile system that we're giving them to defend themselves against an attack. All I know is that, to me, there would be greater clarity if we weren't, releasing the sanctions on Iran, appeasing Iran on one hand, letting them finance Hezbollah, Hamas, these terrorist groups that then attack Israel, and then we talk, well, maybe we'll call for a ceasefire or we won't, and then what signal is that telling the terrorists? I get nervous about creating some moral equivalency between a terrorist organization and the only democracy in the Middle East.
And yes, to clarify, these folks are needed. The THAAD system requires quite a few military personnel in order to operate it. But then let's take a wider view, because you've both now said that you support Israel's right to defend itself. The Biden administration on Sunday sent a letter to the Israeli government stating essentially that it needs to get in check with regard to the humanitarian crisis and potential human rights violations. 30 days to do that, or putting the aid from the U.S. In jeopardy. Should Israel have the right to defend itself without conditions on weapons and aid? I'll ask you first.
I think you have allies for a reason. They're your friends and you trust them. And I don't think that war is the type of thing that you can micromanage. I think Israel has a right to run its war. I don't.
Even when it's with a regional powerhouse like Iran and not a proxy war like it was previously.
Well, Israel has a right to defend and win, and Iran has now attacked Israel.
Mr. Kim?
Well, when we have partners and allies around the world, we support many of them, but we should have a single standard. We have to hold our, a certain accountability. And when we're a partner, yes, we work with them to understand, what is going to take for them to win, what is the right types of defense equipments to be able to do so. And yes, we should have standards when it comes to access to humanitarian aid and other aspects of that to make sure that this is going through the proper way. Be able to make sure we're holding that sense. We do that for our own troops. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. We hold our own troops accountable in that way. And yes, I think we should hold everyone to that standard.
So do you think that the Biden administration there's this thing, the Leahy Law, right, which is named after the Vermont senator, which applies those standards and those conditions. But the Biden administration